I think submitting to editors, for me anyway, was far scarier and harder than the rejection from agents. Because I think, and I heard someone say, well, it's like the last step, right? Like when you're looking to get an agent, you know that there's still a while to get to publication. Like you need to get the agent and then, you need to edit it together and you need to send it out. Whereas when it's gone off to editors, if they say yes, that's it.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Conversation with Nadine Matheson. As always, I hope that you're well and I hope that you've had a good week. My week was good. Last week was cold. It was very cold. If you follow me on social media, especially Instagram, then you would have seen my Insta stories of me walking outside in the freezing cold, -2. -2. It's so cold, it's bitter. It's so bitter. And you have to be so careful because there's black ice everywhere. But I do my morning walk. And the reason why I do it is because I spend the vast majority of my time sitting at my desk. When I was a lawyer, when I was practicing full time as a lawyer, I am pretty sure that I was putting in at least a minimum of 15,000 steps a day, easily. And I wish I'd been monitoring it back then. I really wish, because then I wouldn't feel so guilty when I look at my Apple Watch and see sometimes that all I've managed to do is 6,000 steps for the day. So that's the reason why I get up and walk. I thought if I get up and walk, get it done early, then I'm motivated and set for the day. But other than that, walking outside in the freezing cold with my cup of tea, I had a good week. Last week I was plotting. It sounds so ominous, doesn't it? Plotting. But I was plotting my stories. As you know, I am very much a planner. And there are a lot of different writing projects that I want to take on and actually finish this year. So I decided that the first working week of January would be my week where I would plot my stories. But it wasn't easy. That first day back at my desk, it wasn't easy because at one point I looked at the screen and I looked at my notebook and I said to myself, I have no idea what words are. Like, I have no idea how to plot. What is a 3-act structure? Like, what are words? What are characters? Like, my brain was blank, but then I got it together. And I got it done. But whilst I was plotting struggling to plot, I did think, if you're a pantser, you don't have to deal with this. You just have to sit at your desk and just write and just see where the story takes you. Unfortunately, that is not me. I like to have a plan. Anyway, let's get on with this show. This week, I'm in conversation with author and also lawyer Rhiannon Barnsley. And I enjoyed this conversation for so many reasons, but one of the reasons was I really feel that there are really good tips for writers. Not just practical writing tips, but also a bit of a reality check of what happens once you sign with an agent and your book goes out on submission and dealing with rejection. So take on board those tips when you hear them. But also in our conversation, Rhiannon Barnsley and I talk about the personal connections that we have with our books, the impact of AI on publishing and the lack of transparency, and how we steal time as writers. Now, as always, sit back, we'll go for a walk and enjoy the conversation. Rhiannon Barnsley, welcome to The Conversation.
Thank you very much.
Right, my first question for you, because I know that you are a lawyer, like myself.
Yes.
I always say, so I was talking about the baby lawyers earlier, I always say to the baby lawyers, like when I finish teaching at the end of the course, I always say to them, make sure you have something other than this job, because this job will consume you. I give them my little that's like my little therapy session at the end of our 3-day course. You need I don't care what it is, whether it's you do pottery, whether you write or you go mountain climbing, I don't care, but just have something else other than this, because you don't want this to be 24/7 like your entire life. So when did you know that writing was going to be your other thing in addition to your career? Oh, my voice went.
Oh gosh, well, I think like everyone, I think that ends up writing. Well, I loved reading as a kid, loved books, did all those library challenges that you would get. But then as I got older, I think especially doing a law degree, you have to read so many textbooks and cases and really boring things that I just stopped reading. And then I sort of rediscovered it and I got back into reading, but it was actually sort of the lockdowns and the pandemic. And I remember we had the lockdown sort of like in the March of 2020 and we came out of it in the summer. And I'm thinking, oh, that would have been a great time to write a book, because I remember work was really quiet because I used to work like crazy hours till like, you know, late into the night. And then I thought, oh, what a shame. And then obviously we had another lockdown that happened, obviously, which, you know, was not a great thing. But then I thought, you know what, no, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to set myself some goals and I'm going to write. So I did a writing course by Faber Academy, which is like a 9-month writing course. And I was like, I'm going to really commit to this. And it was all online, so you could kind of manage it at your own pace.
Yeah.
And I think when I finished that, I had the first draft of my first book. And that was kind of how I got into it. And I was like, wow, I loved this. And then I was really worried about once everything returned to normality and people went back to the office, if I'd be able to keep doing it. And thankfully, I have managed to keep writing. It's not always the easiest sometimes when you're working late, but I love it so much that it's not even like a chore to fit in. It's not like, oh, I need to find time to do that. It's like, oh no, I want to do this because this makes me happy and this makes me, you know, it's almost like a type of therapy for me to do the writing.
Did you know you had it? Did you know you had it in you? Like that writing, I don't know what to call it, a writing gene. Is there a writing gene?
A writing gene?
I can't think of the word, but it's like, did you know you had that in you?
I don't know really. Like, I've obviously always loved reading. I mean, I don't know if you could be a good at reading. I don't know. But I've always enjoyed writing, but I've never really done creative writing, like maybe like at GCSE or something when, you know, you're told to write a story and it's part of your coursework. But until I really started doing it, I don't think I really realised. It was only once I started really getting into it, because on the course we got feedback from people, and the people were like, "Oh, this is decent." I was like, "Oh, maybe I can do this," and that really helped actually to show me that, you know, maybe I can do this, and maybe people will like it.
Yeah, it just goes to show, because I was talking about this yesterday, that when you've had another career or you're in another career, and you do something new, it doesn't matter how experienced you are in that other thing, when you're doing that something new, and even though you feel like it's such a part of you, that new thing, I think especially when it's something creative, there's so much doubt that comes with that, because that creative thing is about you. It's not just a case that you're working on, it's you, all of you.
It's so personal, isn't it? Compared to, I feel like at work, I mean, if I get like a bad comment at work, obviously that affects me, but not in the same way, because I think there's that distance. But when it's something you've created, especially with writing, you've essentially created it out of, you know, a Microsoft Word document and a laptop, and then everything else has just come in. It just feels like extra, you know, vulnerable, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, it does. I just remembered, like back at work years ago, we had this case, and you know, you advise the client from the very beginning how it's going to go. This is the results. If you don't listen to me, this is what's going to happen. Like, sign my endorsement, because I don't want you coming back to me saying I didn't advise you. Do all of that. And I had this client come to me at the end of it. Actually, he didn't come to me at the end of it. He came to me like 6 months later, not listening to what I told him. And basically he's like, I'm going to put a complaint in. I'm not happy. And because you kind of have these I know, but I think because you have these barriers in place in your profession, you can't, I was like, mate, go and do what you want, because I advised you. You signed the endorsement. I did my job. So go for it. That's what you want to do. And I have backup from my boss.
Yeah, well, exactly.
If that's what you want to do, like, you go for it. So there's this complete separation there. Like, I'm not taking this on personally, but with your book, no, that's me.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. And especially like with my first book, because it's written about my career, it feels extra personal, because I'm like, people do ask me like, is she based on you? Is it you? And I'm like, no, it's not. But there is that part of, oh, actually there is that personal connection to it.
Did you know you was going to write about a law firm? Because I consciously made a determined effort, or not the effort, a decision in the beginning, that when I was doing the course, that I was not going to write basically like a legal thriller. I was like, no, I'm not. I think because that's what's expected of me, because I'm a lawyer, regardless of whatever area of law I worked in. And I was like, I'm not. And it's like, I'm not giving that to the people. I'm going to do something else. So I decided to write police procedurals, because I just didn't want. It felt like an extra pressure in a sense.
Yeah, Yeah, I think, well, so my debut was actually the second book I ever wrote. My first one was more sort of domestic suspense. And then so the Clique, I think that I can tell you exactly how it came about. I was on Twitter looking, and I follow a lot of authors.
Yeah.
And one of them there was just a big press release about a book that was coming out. And it was called Falling by TJ Newman. And I remember saying, it's the one about the plane falling. And I remember being like, oh, it's based on the fact she was a flight attendant for so many years. And I was like, wow, I wish I had a cool job that I could write about. And then I was like, oh, wait, like Suits exists. That's like a 9-season TV show about corporate lawyers. Obviously in America, and we didn't, I'm not sure how realistic a lot of it is, but I was like, oh, okay, maybe people do care. And then when I started writing it, I was like, this is easy. I don't need to do any research because it's basically my day-to-day life. So, but I'm not going to repeat doing that. It was just, I think it was quite a nice book for me to write because I didn't have to do the research or the hard stuff like that or Google things to find out, that I could really focus on the writing, which I think helped being so early on in my career.
Yeah, I think that's always say it's one of the bonuses of writing maybe like your first 2 books, because a lot of people, their first book, it never gets published. It's either still sitting in the drawer, it's still sitting on their desktop, but it's normally that second book is the one that gets published. But you always write, I'll say those first 2 books, you write it in a kind of vacuum. There's no one unless you're doing a course, but there's no one asking for it. You haven't got an agent, you haven't got an editor. It's just you. So there's no pressure. So there's comfort in that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think having the comfort of, I set it in London, which is where I live. So again, I didn't need to research places. I use places that I know well. Having the backdrop as like my day job, all I really needed to focus on was the storyline and the characters, really. But rather than everything at once. And then I feel like it means for my future books, when I do then focus on everything, it just becomes a bit more natural and a bit easier. Yeah, that's what I think. Anyway,
you've done the hard job. You've done the practice run. It's like, right now I know. I know how to do this and what needs to be done.
Yes.
What surprised you the most, though? Because I've always liked to know at this question, but what surprised you the most about the industry once you were in it?
Oh, what surprised me the most about the industry? I mean, I think how wide spanning it is, which is going to sound really weird, but obviously this might be because I just follow loads of authors and writers, but I feel like books are everywhere, like TikTok. So I've recently gotten into TikTok and BookTok, and it is amazing how many people just love books. And I put a video up the other day because there are people reading 25 books a month every single month. And I'm just like, that is incredible that people are doing that. And I feel like, a few years ago, I feel like if I asked people I know, oh, do you read? They'd be like, no, not really. Whereas now I feel like reading's cool again. And everyone wants to do it and they want to talk about their favorite books. And then you see all these books being adapted for film and TV. And, every time I'm like, I want to watch that series, I'm like, oh, wait, that's based off a book, or, oh, that film looks great. Oh, yeah, that's also based off a book. So it's just, I think the impact that books have on everything. And I really like it when you see in the bookseller an article about a book that's, being released. And then you find out in a few years, oh, now it's a TV show, or now it's a massive Hollywood blockbuster.
I think that's the good thing about social media, for all its moments when you just want it to just disappear because it's it's just gone off on some crazy tangent. But in exposing you to not even necessarily new things, but showing you the wider world of things that you already know, like books. They said we all, most of us, say we've read. Sometimes you were forced to read because of school. But then I think because when you're forced to read in school and you're only, you just read the books that are on the curriculum, and it doesn't feed everyone's taste and interest. So I think that's when maybe people's desire for reading can get a bit stilted because you're like, I was forced to Jane Eyre in school and the Bell Jar, and I didn't want to read that.
Yeah. It's always the same types of books, isn't it? It's always the classics, isn't it, that people end up reading, which isn't everyone's taste. If I'm honest, I've not read a type of book like that since I was at school because it's, I like the sort of commercially thrillers. Those are the books I gravitate towards. Yeah. Whereas you don't get taught any of those in school.
No, you don't. They should do that, because they don't. I guarantee if I went to my goddaughter who's now 15 and I looked at the list of books she has to read for English class, it wouldn't be anything new. I've guaranteed she probably still has like the Lost, not the Lost Boys, Lord of the Flies. Lost Boys is a
Oh,
film.
guys.
I meant to say
Yes.
Lord of the Flies. I'm sure they wouldn't mind watching the Lost Boys, but get myself together. But I'm pretty sure Lord of the Flies is still on there. Maybe
I did Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, I did Lord of the Flies. Like 1984 is probably still on there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think in terms of Shakespeare. What did I do? I did Merchant of Venice. I think my brother did.
I did Much Ado About Nothing, I think.
Yeah, all of that. But in terms, I think that's what English classes need to do.
Yeah, I don't think they changed the curriculum. I bet you if I went back to my school, like, what books are you doing? They'd be like exactly the same as they did when I was there, and probably the same for generations and generations before that. And there's so many good books that have come out in that time. Like, obviously, like there's a reason there's classics for a reason, right? But also there's so many amazing modern books that just don't even get a look in.
Exactly. I just thought Wuthering Heights, guaranteed. They're still reading that.
Yeah.
There's not anything wrong with it, but I just feel that if you want to keep people engaged, I say people, young kids engaged and have that enthusiasm for reading, carry on throughout their lives, open up their world, which is why, going back to my original point, social media, in that sense, the book talks and bookstagrams and whatever, like they are a good thing. Yeah,
they're great thing. I love them. I love Book Talk. It's my current daily obsession. Just scrolling.
No, I had to install the Freedom app on my phone. I'm not being sponsored by Freedom app, but feel free if they want to. But I had to install the Freedom app on my phone because I'm like, I need a cutoff point. I need something to listen to, and I have it on my desktop as well for when I'm working. But just to cut off all social media at a set time, and I have it reoccurring. So I can't access any social media after 10:30. And it's been a lifesaver because I'm down a rabbit hole on TikTok.
Yeah. A
ridiculous rabbit hole. That's got nothing to do with the original reason why I went on there in the first place.
The thing is, sometimes you start scrolling, just like 5 minutes, and then it's an hour, and I literally haven't moved. I'm in the exact same position. And I'm like, what have I done? Like, what have I been doing for the last hour? Oh, I've literally just been on TikTok. But it feels like 2 minutes has passed.
It does. My dad knows if I call him or I'm like, oh, where's mum? And he'll say she's down the rabbit hole. And what that means is, but not on TikTok, she's on Reels. So she's found whatever she's on Reels and she's gone.
Yeah.
And when I speak
to her, there's YouTube as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think YouTube's the worst of rabbit holes because then you end up on watching like obscure adverts from like the 90s or something really random, and you're like, how did I get here?
You know what I've noticed about YouTube is that because I've been watching a lot of, when I'm working, I always have something on in the background, and for some reason it's been like I like long form conversations and stuff like that. So something just keep going whilst I'm working. So I've had those on in the background on my second monitor. And then what I've noticed is the number of, because there's always, unless you're paying for premium, you're just constantly, it's getting interrupted for an advert.
Yeah.
But what I noticed recently was the number of adverts to do with publishing your book. So for either self-publishing or doing an audio book. But the number,
really?
Yeah, but the number of them that will say, you literally like, you can publish your book, write your book and publish your book in 36 hours. And I'm like, what? Like, I stop what I'm doing, turn to the left. I'm like, what are you talking about? They're like, but then they have the caveat with AI. And I'm like, how are you? Yeah. I take great offense. I'm like, how? How are you promoting this?
Hours?
It was 36 hours.
No. I actually can't even like mentally comprehend 36 hours.
No, you can't.
You gotta write a chapter.
If you're lucky, you might write a chapter. Do you think about that? Yeah. Do you think about how much AI has an impact on not only how books are necessarily like promoted, and in terms of even like doing translations, because they were talking about I think it's in the bookseller about some publishers using AI to translate their books. But do you think about how much AI is spoken about in publishing in terms of writing?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's super transparent how much it is used. And I think that's possibly because they know there is a bit of a backlash against it, because obviously with AI, you know, things like ChatGPT and things like that, you know, people are worried that they'll be used to write books and write novels. And obviously, you know, I always think it's never going to be quite the same as when a human has written a book and, you know, come up with all the scenarios and, you know, put real emotion to characters that might be based on, you know, their own feelings or their own experiences. But yeah, I think it's probably used, definitely, but I don't really think it's clear to what extent it's being used or how it's being used. I mean, I don't think there's any publisher saying, oh, well, any of the main publishers saying, oh, we're going to get books written with AI. But I have heard of AI being used to like create covers, for example, and like AI art used, especially in like translated editions. I don't know if it's happened here, but I have heard that that's starting to happen.
I see it a lot on on threads, because I'm not on Twitter anymore. So I see it on threads from people talking about how AI is being used in books, and there's always backlash and like, but the thing is, they'll say, don't buy this book because it's got an AI cover. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know how you even know. Like some of them to me they don't look obvious at all. So I'm like, well, I don't know how you know, unless it's one that does look really bad. But then it's when you read the comments, I think it just goes back to social media in the whole, but when you're reading the comments and there's going to be the half-Britter firmly like put a pitchfork in the ground, no, we're not against AI, like go away, we're not going to buy your book, we don't want to know you. Then there's the other half is like, well, I don't see nothing wrong with using it for a cover or to help me write my book. And you're like, I don't think you should be saying that here. Like, just keep that to yourself.
I have heard of authors who have said they use like AI, like ChatGPT, to like write outlines and things like that, and they put content into it and they use that to like generate like chapter plans or outlines or like plot twists and things like that.
Really?
Yeah, I've only seen people say, no one I like personally know, but you know, on like threads or Twitter, or, you know, when you just see like a tweet that just comes up maybe. And I have heard of people using it for that, and I think some writers are thinking it's a helpful tool for planning, etc. But then obviously everything you put in, I think they remember it, don't they? And they use that to train themselves. So there is a bit of a risk, I think, with that.
Yeah, I've heard someone using it to, I mean, I don't know why they just couldn't use Street View, but they've used it as a AI version of Street View. So to describe a place they haven't been, so then they say get an idea of what this place is like if it's in another country, for example, but then they use it in their text. And I'm like, can't you just spend and do what I do? Like go on Street View for an hour and try and zoom in and zoom out. And
for an hour, and then you ended up somewhere like way further than when you were supposed to be. But you're like, oh, that's a nice coffee shop over there.
I'll have to go when I visit San Francisco one time. It's just, I just find, I think because, you know, if you're constantly in front of your computer like I am, and you got, because I can't work in silence, I've always got other things going on. And you just, you know, I can't do it. So you pick up on things and you're just like, what? Are you a planner then? Or are you a pantser?
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely a planner. I think sometimes you say you're a planner, people think you plan out like absolutely everything that ever happens and nothing like organically happens. But I would say I sort of have like a loose outline of sort of what I'm going to write in each chapter. But then I do change it as I go along because I think of new ideas, or I'm like, oh, actually, no, that's terrible. Why did I want that to happen? So I definitely plan things out. But I think partly that's because I don't have loads of time to write. When I do come to write, it really helps to be like, right, you need to write this and it's about this, even if it's like 2 bullet points. And that helps me go. Whereas I find I think one of the books, so my debut book, I got stuck in the middle because I hadn't planned out the middle. And I remember I was stuck there for ages because I was like, I don't know what to write about. I don't know what happens. And so I think since then I've like, no, I need to plan, especially the middle. Especially, I don't care so much if I don't know what's going to happen at the end because I'll discover that. But I'm like, I need to plan the middle, or it's just you just get stuck.
I find not that I find. I did a crime writer special, a live special of the podcast 2 weeks ago, and Eamon Alongo. So it was me, Eamon Alongo, Dorothy Coomson, and Leigh Adenle. And obviously, me and Eamon are the two lawyers on there. And it turned out the two lawyers are the planners. But because I'm not practicing anymore, so I have more time. But Eamon still practices. You know, he's working full time, and he was the same way you're saying because of the time constraints. That's the reason why he plans. To the extent, I don't know, I can't remember if he or whether we were talking about John Grisham with the yellow different multicolored tags. Like I don't go that far. But I have the plan. But again, like you're saying, I don't necessarily. I call it a safety net. So it doesn't mean
that's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, I don't stick rigidly to everything in the plan because you said things develop organically and then you go off on different subplots come out of nowhere and you're just like, okay, I'll just have to amend my plan a bit, but at least it's somewhere to go to if I do go off way off the road.
I think if anyone wants to write and they're worried about time as a factor, because obviously like when people set out writing, most people have like their day job and they might have children or other commitments. I do think planning is one way to really, if you're going to get 30 minutes a day and that's it, to know what you're going to do in that 30 minutes rather than having to spend most of that time thinking, what should I write about? What's going to happen next? If you just got a plan and think, right, I need to write a scene where these two characters have a conversation and finds out this big secret. I just think it's a lot quicker because you skip all that thinking time and you just go into the creative time.
Yeah. And I've always said sometimes, regardless, irrespective of what your job is, you have to steal time from wherever you find it, and you use that stolen time to write. And I don't mean steal time in the sense of, I've got my lunch hour. It could be, I don't know, you're sitting there waiting for someone to pick up the phone, or you're waiting for a Zoom to start, and you have an empty 15 minutes. You can steal that time, even if you just write 2 sentences, and that, or you just come up with an idea for your character. Then that you've stolen the time and you've used that, and it takes you one step forward to your book.
Yeah, well, wasn't it Abigail Dean who, because she was also a lawyer, she wrote lots of Girl A on like the notes app on her phone when she was commuting. Like, I couldn't do the notes. And obviously that is such a big success, and it's just like so even if you're stuck on the tube, just typing out some words, adds up. Even if you're only doing like 500 a day, do that like 5 days a week, and suddenly you're like, hang on, that's like 10,000 words a month.
Exactly. Those are your stolen moments of time. I was always to say, for me being, being a trial lawyer, so I'm in court all the time. But I think I could have a case get called, say it's going to be listed at 10 o'clock. It's not coming on at 10. There's been times when they said it's coming on at 10 and I haven't been called into court till 3:30 in the afternoon. There's only so much prep time I can do. I've done all my prep. I've spoken to whoever's around. There's no one else to talk to. And it's like I've had to use... I can't take any more instructions from my client. It's just, I'm done. And in those moments I said, okay, I can steal this time that I'm writing, that I'm waiting to write.
Probably quite nice as well, because then you can distract yourself and just get immersed into something else. I just find that helps calm me down. Like writing or reading, if I'm really stressed about something that's about to happen, maybe I'm doing a big presentation or I don't know, if like an interview or something like that. If I read or write, that puts me in such a much better mindset than if I just try and prep and try and go over my notes like 500 million times right up to the very last second.
It doesn't help. So when you finished the course, what was your intention? Because I remember when I finished my course, I was like, I just need to get the course done, get this book done, and I'll just carry on the rest of my life. I'm like, whatever happens after that with the book, like I say, if I get an agent, good. If I don't, then whatever, I can self-publish. So those were my options. I wasn't like I'm trying to think of the right way to say it. I wasn't so firmly attached to my book and the outcome, if that makes sense. I was just quite free with it. So when you'd finished, what was you looking for? What was you hoping for?
I think I was very set on, I want to get this published. So basically, as soon as I finished, because I think I'd pretty much done the first draft by the time I finished, and then I did a bit of work on editing it, and then I was like, I'm going to try and get an agent. Pretty much once that was done and ready, I was like, I'm going to get an agent now, and that was what I did. I just threw everything into querying and all the fun and games that comes with that. I don't know. I just always had my eyes on, no, I want it published. I want it to be, a book that people can buy and people can read. I think I just love books and bookshops and buying books. And I was like, I want my book to be one of those. So yeah, straight into querying.
And how did you find the process? And how easy is it? Because everyone's got especially on this podcast, you hear everyone's got so many different experiences of getting an agent. Some they've met their agent at a festival and they've pitched and they're like, I want to read the rest of it. Yeah, some have done, they've done it through competitions, or they literally have been picked off a slush pile. There's so many different, or others have been approached by publishers first, and then they've had to do it the other way around. And find an agent.
Yes. Oh gosh. Well, it's a hard process, but the way I actually ended up getting mine was Faber Academy does, if you do a longer course, so the writing a novel one, which is the one that I did, I think is 9 months. So anyone that does one of their longer courses, because they do like 6 weeks ones, they do a sort of I can't what they call it. I'm gonna say portfolio. They do like a publication at the end of it, and if you've done those longer courses, you're allowed to submit like a synopsis and like the first, I think it was like 2,500 words, and it got sent out to agents with like your contact details, and if agents liked it, they could obviously email you and ask for your full manuscript, and that's what's happened to me, and that's how I then got my agent. So I think before that happened, I did have to go through the normal querying process, and I didn't get much success that way.
We always talk about rejection. That sounds so deep when I'm putting it. We always talk about rejection on this, because it just comes out. It's just like part and parcel of life. And when you're applying to be a solicitor in the United Kingdom, I should clarify. Obviously, well, depending on when you did it, like the process that when I did it, you have to apply for training contracts, and then you go through that, and the training contract process, so it's just very, very competitive, like really competitive.
Yes.
And there's lots of there's some people, they submit so many applications, get so many rejections before they finally get their training contract. So I don't know what your experience was like getting your training contract, and whether dealing with rejection, or whether any of that process prepared you for the submission to agents, and then following on from that, the submission to editors.
So when I applied to be a solicitor, it was very much like you have to apply for training contracts, and you send so many applications when you're doing it, and each one wants something different. Tell me why you like this firm. What is it about us that you like? Why would you be good here? And then if you're lucky enough, you might get through to an interview, and then maybe another interview. So there was a lot of rejection when I was applying to be a lawyer. Obviously, I was very lucky that I got my offer when I was in my second year of university. So luckily I had that secured. But, I know a lot of people, who I did my course with that, it took 3 or 4 years to get that. And that's not uncommon for people who want to train to be solicitors, to either have to spend quite a few years getting that place, or to do a different career and then change their career, because it's a really competitive industry. But in terms of how it prepared me for writing, I think it's kind of like what we said at the beginning. There is a certain vulnerability when it's your writing that isn't the same as your work life. So when I was applying to be a lawyer, that was my whole life at that point. But again, because you know who you're up against your classmates, and such intelligent, bright, amazing people that you can kind of almost be like, oh, it's not about me, it's not personal, it's a numbers game. But I feel like when it's your manuscript that you wrote, it's so hard to be like, oh well, there's just so many books out there, which is true. You just think, oh, it's me, it's my book, I'm not good enough. I think it's so much easier to feel like that. I think submitting to editors, for me anyway, was far scarier and harder than the rejection from agents, because I think, and I heard someone say, well, it's like the last step, right? Like when you're looking
Yeah.
to get an agent, you know that there's still a while to get to publication. Like you need to get the agent, and then you need to edit it together and you need to send it out. Whereas when it's gone off to editors, if they say yes, that's it.
Mm.
Especially when it gets close, because I think some people think you just send the book off to editors and they go, yep, I'll have that one. But actually it goes through so many stages. Like it goes to first reads and then second reads, and then it might go to a meeting, and then it goes to an acquisition meeting. And if at any point someone says no, that means your book's a no. And sometimes it gets all the way to those big acquisition meetings and it just doesn't go the right way. And I think that's really heartbreaking, because how close you might have been to a yes.
Listeners, it's time for a very short break. If you're enjoying this conversation with Nadine Matheson and want to help keep the podcast going, why not buy me a cup of coffee? Your support goes such a long way in keeping these conversations flowing. Just check out the link in the show notes. I know a few authors who they've had, and it's not their first book. This might be their third, fourth, or fifth book, and either they're out of contract or they've gone, they're going through to new. They're trying to find new publishers, and the agents have sent their books out, and they've got through to acquisitions, and it's at the acquisition stage. They've said someone in the room has said no.
Yeah,
and at that point, that's it. And either you go back and start again. Yeah, I think it's horrible. It's like doing a relay race.
The hardest thing.
Yeah, you do a relay.
And you're the last person. You get 3/4 of the way there, and then someone drops the baton, and then it's like, oh, yeah, now we're going to lose.
And and then you're like, what can you do? You're like, I did everything. Like I got you in the place where you were going to get the gold medal. Now you're not getting anything. Now we're disqualified.
Yeah. I do think that is the hardest, because my first book didn't sell on submission, and it did go to acquisitions twice, and that was the most heartbreaking thing I think I had, because I was like, I was so close both times. And obviously I then wrote my second book, which is the one that got published. But the fact to get so close, it's just really difficult.
It is. And this is a thing that's not really, unless you listen to podcasts like this, or you happen to go to an author talk, and they're asked about, their journey, then you might find out about this part of it, that whole, what happens between submission to an editor and then you getting your contract and signing. You're not really aware of that outside of, I say, these mediums. I can't think of many places. Unless it's changed. I can't remember picking up the Writers and Artists Yearbook and finding that section on what happens, as part of submission. And also, there's not much information as to what happens after you sign with an agent. There's always information as to this is what you need to do to submit to an agent. But there's a big gap that's empty, and you're just
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel that, and I mean, I guess part of it's because everyone's journey is so different. Everyone's experience is different, because you have some people that will sign with an agent, and then within a month their book's been sent off to editors. Whereas I've heard of other people that they edit with their agent for like 1 to 2 years before it gets sent out to editors, and it really depends on your agent and how, because some are more hands-on editorially, where some are a bit more like, well, actually the editor's going to want to change things anyway, so let's not get too deep into things. And it also depends on your genre, the market. There's so many factors as to how they determine where to send a book and what the right time is, that everyone's journey is different. But you're right, there's not a lot of, if you looked for information, because I think I did, there isn't much out there. And but obviously you can ask your agent, and they'll tell you what the process is. But again, it's always going to be slightly different for every single person.
It's like and you're right, because I remember when I first went out on submission, my journey, it was so quick. It was like I got, in London you get the Waterloo and City line, which is like two.
Yes.
Sometimes I think about what's the point of this tube line, which is literally 2 stops, Waterloo and Bank, and it goes back. That's it. Those are the 2. Else. Yeah, there's nothing else. And if I didn't realise there's going to be a TFL analogy to all this, but that's how I think of my process of getting an agent and then going out on submission. It was literally like getting on the Waterloo and City line. It was so quick because my agent started reading my book manuscript. It was before Christmas, and then I think before Christmas, before the New Year even started, he wanted to see me. I signed with him on end of January because I signed up him on my birthday. I then went out on submission on the 18th of on the 18th of February. I went out on submission.
Oh
And
wow,
like,
that is really
yeah.
quick.
And he'd read the manuscript, and same thing. We did like an agent editorial thing with it. And he's like, "Can you do these edits in?" And I can. I'm like, if you give me a deadline, I can. I think you might be. I say it's a lawyer thing. Give us a deadline, and
Tell us when you want it.
tell us when you want it. There won't be no if and about. Yeah, I can do it. And he gave me a date. He's like, "Can you do this edits in this literally like a week, 2 weeks?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can do that." So I did that, and then no word of a lie, he sent it out on a Tuesday, and Friday we had the first offer. But then it said everyone's journey, and you know, it's just when you're
different.
Yeah, and when you're just new, you think, "Oh, that happens to everyone," but then you realize that doesn't necessarily happen to everyone. Everyone's journey can be so different and so so varied, and
exactly. I think if you're on submission, don't read the bookseller.
No,
because
no.
obviously you'll see they're like preempted in 24 hours and 48-hour preempt and overnight and and then you just feel like if you've been, it'll have been a week, which is nothing. A week is nothing for submission. And you'll be like, gosh, why wasn't my book preempted within 48 hours? Like, what's going on? Why isn't it already sold in 7 territories or something like that? But then you realize that is definitely the exception. And, I don't think it's uncommon for people to be on submission to editors for 6, 7, 8, 9 months. And that's common. And there are books that get bought after being on submission for a long time that go on to do really, really well. So it's not even if your book doesn't get picked up straight away, that's it, you're doomed. There's loads of bestsellers and brilliant books that, sometimes it just takes a bit longer because editors are so busy that, they have obviously their current authors to deal with, their own timeline. The reading, submissions that come in, I think a lot of the time happen outside of work hours or, late at night or, so that's why it takes so long, not because there's anything wrong with people's books.
What would be your number one? I say number one, I put so much pressure on it. What would be a tip? What would be a tip that you would give to an author who is just going out on submission?
Write another book. 100 million % write another book, because one, it distracts you because you are going to want to check your email like 200 million times a day and like wear it out from the amount you like try and refresh it. You're going to go crazy every time, like the email dings. So you need to distract yourself. And I think the best way to do that is write another book, because one of two things is going to happen. If you don't sell, which, is common, like it does happen, you're already working on something else, and maybe you might love it even more and think, actually, actually, this is the book I want to have as my first book anyway. Or if you do sell, if you sell in a 2-book deal, which is quite common, you've already got something else that you're working on that you can tell that potentially interested publisher about, because once you are contracted for a second book, you're going to then have a deadline. And if you want longer to write, if you already started writing some of it, I think it alleviates some of that pressure.
No, you're right. When I signed with my agent, and I think I'd gone to a talk at the university where I'd done the course, and my tutor, who happens to have the same agent now, and he was like, "Congratulations!" And but he said to me, "My number one advice to you is start book 2 now." And I was like, "Book 2?" Literally, I just threw book 2 out as an idea out when I was having my chat with my agent before I signed with him. It wasn't a firm thing in my head. He just asked me, "What's your second book about?" And I was like, "This." But that's as far as I got with it. But he said to me, "Just start." He goes, "Yes, you're out on submission." I can't remember if I had my deal yet. I must have had the deal, been offered a deal. But he's like, "Just start writing book 2 now." And I think that's the best advice. Just whenever you finish, just have a break, but then start the next one.
Yeah, because even if you get a deal, like I think people think you get a deal and straight away you and your editor start working on the book, but that's not true. Like you get your deal and then it's probably going to be quite a few months until you get your first edit letter written.
Yeah.
So obviously, take the time, like obviously celebrate it, like brilliant, have a bit of a break, but then actually start working on your second book, because what I actually found possibly the hardest thing about getting like a 2-book deal is at one point you're working on 2 books, you're editing your first book that's coming out, but you need to also be writing your second book as well, because otherwise you're going to have no time to get them both, because usually they're within a year of each other, right? But you have to finish it a certain amount of time before it comes out in publication, because you're going to go through 4 or 5 edit processes, proofreading it, the designers have got to design the cover. They've got to do like publicity for it. There's so many things that go into a book that if you started writing your second one, you've got such a head start rather than being like, oh gosh, I've not even written anything of my second book and it's coming out next year.
Yeah, that's something you're not prepared for at all. The fact that there's going to be a point where you're going to be working on 2 books at the same time, because it's not linear in that sense. It's not you finish one, everything is done, and then you move on to the next. That's not how it doesn't run like that, like carriages on a train. If there are 2 trains going at the same time, I don't know what is it with me and my train analogies today.
Yeah, but I feel like one's a high-speed train, which is the book that's coming out first, but then you've got the slower train that maybe stops at more stops, but it's still going alongside it.
The train analogy makes sense. Yes. But no one tells you that when you're in it. I remember the same thing. I must have been editing the Jigsaw Man and I'm writing the binding room. And then, you get into getting into the flow finally, because I'm doing all this in lockdown, and I'm getting into the flow of writing the binding room. And then, email alert pops up. Oh, here are your edits for the Jigsaw Man. And then I'm like, okay, now I need to stop the binding room when I'm in mid-flow, go back to the Jigsaw Man, do whatever needs to be done, edits, line edits, and then send that off and then go back to the binding room. Then you have to find your flow again. And then you get into it. Oh, email alert number 2 comes in. Here's your line edits. You're like, oh, for God. And I'm like, how am I supposed to get this done? But that's the process. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's actually, I would say, the hardest thing about transitioning to writing when you don't have a deal or you don't have an agent and you're doing it, for fun and you have no pressure. That to then be like, you've got to learn to juggle and pull yourself out of a world you're immersed in, put yourself into another one. And even then, once your book's published, then you've got to add like promoting and like social media and stuff if you choose to do it on top of that as well. So, for example, right now I'm trying to write book 3, edit book 2, but then I'm still like, oh, well, actually, my first book, try and promote that one as well. So then you're like, it's like a constant cycle, isn't it?
That was me this week. I have to write a short story, which I keep banging on about this short story because I'm like, this should not be taking me this long. But I don't think I'm a natural short story teller. Like, I have to work. I can do it, but I have to work harder at it. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But I'm doing this short story. And then I've got another manuscript that I've been working on for so long. And I promised my agent, I was like, you know what, I'm going to get it to you. And it's not something that's in contract. So I'm like, I had a timeline, I had a plan of how I'm going to do these things. And then also I'm like, okay, I need to do a proposal for some standalones. And then there's something else I need to do. So I'm like, I had these 4 things, but I planned out how I'm going to do it. And I'm good with the plan. Rhiannon, did not my edits for Henley Book 4 just suddenly land in my inbox. I think it was Monday. I think it was Monday. And then when it landed, and I love my editor, but I looked at this email, I was like, what? Already? I was like, and then I'm thinking, okay, this plan has now gone to pot because now my edits have come in. And that's something you're not. I think the only thing I can compare it to is doing trials in court. And then you're doing your trial, you're doing whatever, and then something comes up, some legal argument comes up, and the judge says, okay, fine. I need, you need to make an application. I need a legal argument. I need a skeleton argument from both of you to be my inbox by 10 o'clock tonight. And you're like, I wasn't planning on writing a legal argument tonight. You're telling me this at 4 o'clock. So now I've got to go home, write a legal argument, make sure it's delivered to you for 10 so we can then argue it in court on Tuesday or the next day. That's the only thing I can compare it to.
Yeah, because I think you always, when you send anything back to your editor, you're like, I reckon it'll take this long for them to come back to me, or sometimes I'll give you a deadline. You're like, okay, but then it never happens like that. And then sometimes, especially with like when you get to like line edits and copy edits, they're so quick. You send it off, you think, okay, I've got some breathing space, and then you're like, wait, what? I've already got them back. I don't want them back yet.
This is the thing, but then you have to say to yourself, no, this is what I signed up for. This is what I want. I want to be a published best-selling author. So I am not, it's like I do not have the right to complain. It's like you have to tell yourself these things, even though the other side of you is just swearing. It's like, what the hell? So
But this is why I think the
Rhiannon,
planning helps with that.
yeah, no, definitely. The planning does help. So even though I said my edits came in and I was like, okay, fine. I can do this. I'm like, I have a plan. I just need to now move the plan around.
Yeah.
So I can, I have my initial reaction to it, but it's not so much a feeling of like, I can't do this. Like, where am I going to find the time? So I have something to work with so I can move it around. Rhiannon, I feel like we need to talk about your book, The Click or The Clique,
Yes.
before we move on. So would you like to tell the listeners of the conversation about your debut? Oh, how did it feel to have your debut in your hand when it was finally in your hands?
Gosh, it just didn't feel real. Like, even once I held it in my hand, I was like, I still felt like it was a dream. This isn't real. This is what I wrote it. That's my name. That is my name on that cover. I wrote this.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Sometimes I forget as well. I'm like, oh yeah. Like, because it's something I've wanted for so long, and it's been, when people say my childhood dream is to be an actor or to be a singer, like mine was to be a writer. And then when it comes true, I don't feel like I really knew how to react because I never really thought it would. So
it is a funny feeling, and you said I wrote this, and I always feel like it's what a child would say. I made this, I did this, but that is the same. Every time I'll see a copy of my book, I'm like, oh my god, I wrote this. And you do to go back to that childlike feeling of I wrote this, I made this. It's like, look what I did, and you can't believe you did this, but you did do that thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell us about The Clique.
Yes. So as we've already sort of alluded to, it's set in the world of an elite law firm in London, and it follows Cassandra, who she's a senior associate and she's trying to become a partner, which is like the top of the legal profession for solicitors in the UK. And one morning, she's doing some conference calls, she's working hard, and something happens. And it turns out that her colleague, her mentor at the firm, has jumped from the roof of the building where they work. And obviously, Cassandra is devastated at this. She really looked up to this person, and she's confused because this person was a really young partner. She seems to have, made her life. She's got the career she always wanted. She's really ambitious. And then she starts asking around, and she thinks she can't have jumped because people are saying she jumped, and then people are saying it's an accident. She doesn't believe any of it. And then she finds out that this mentor called Sara was part of a clique called Inside, which is an exclusive female-owned networking society, which is meant to help women rise to the top of their careers. And as Cassandra gets more into the society, because a spot opens up on Sara's death, she starts to realise maybe they had something to do with what happened to her, and maybe they're hiding secrets.
It sounds so good. And it just literally brought me back. Not that this was a secret society. No, it wasn't a secret society sort of thing. But I do remember, like, when I qualified, receiving those invitations to these. I'm saying like women only because they wanted to try to encourage women, in the legal profession to rise, and getting those invitations to these lunches and these evenings to discuss and network. You just think
there are women's only networking clubs that exist in London.
Yeah.
I must say I didn't write this about any of them, but there are clubs that exist like this, and obviously it's to help promote, women in the workplace, especially in law, where law is a funny profession in that when you enter at the junior level, it's actually like 50-50 men and women, but when you get to the top ranks, it's very badly disproportionate, and places where you'd be like 10% women or less. And that's not uncommon. So that's why I thought, well, surely a place like this must exist. And I'm sure they do. And, there's so many networking societies in London and memberships you can, pay membership to that do networking things and aim to connect people. And I've just put a little sinister spin on it.
Have you had the question, other than is it you, but is this anyone I know, or am I in it? Or if anyone's like looking at you sideways?
All the time. I get it all the time. People are just convinced that I've put people in and just changed their names. Yeah, everyone that I've ever worked with is like, is it this person? Is it that person? Who did you write that about? I'm like, oh no. But like, none of it's really based on one particular person. It's like an amalgamation of things and of traits and of things I've seen. And, there is an element of realism to it, because some of the things that are in there, I think some people would be like, that's really unrealistic. And I'm like, actually, it's not as unrealistic as you might think, especially the
No.
stuff to do with her working day. That does happen. Like,
Yeah.
that
But it's
is
like,
realistic.
but it's like, when we were talking before we started recording, and I said to you, like, the advice I always give to my baby lawyers at the end of the course, which is find something other than this to keep you going and to sustain you, because especially when you're working in the city, actually forget city, legal aid, high street firms, whatever, it's all consuming. And it's if it can be more than 24/7, it is more than 24/7. And there's so many firms in the city where everything is provided for you, from people coming in to give you massages. Yeah. And they got cubicles for you to go and have a sleep and do your dry cleaning, and on site this and on site that. And you are living and sleeping in the law firm. So I'll say to them, I'm like, I have conversations like, what do you do? Do you bake? And actually I had one saying, yeah, she's like, I cook. And she showed me all the things she'd baked. I was like, keep doing that. Like, just keep doing that, because you need something else.
Yeah, you do. And the environment in the clique so I based it on an American law firm, which, if anyone in the know knows, American law firms in the UK are particularly known for having super, super long hours. And all the stuff that to do with her, like eating dinner at her desk every night, that is not made up. That is what happens.
I remember when I wasn't a trainee, I was a paralegal, and I was working, I'm not going to name the firm, but I was working for a firm in the city. And I remember I came in, I left Tuesday night. I think I must have left about 5:36, said goodbye. It wasn't the partner, it was one of the assistant associates. Said goodbye to him, and then came back the following morning, and he's the first person I see. And there's a moment I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, are you still wearing the same clothes from yesterday? And but in my head, I don't know why it clicked in my head, but I'm like, no, he's still wearing the same clothes from yesterday. And I must have said something to him. He's like, yeah, like, he goes, like, I haven't gone home. He hadn't gone home. And it's those super long hours. And and I remember looking for like paralegal jobs or talking to agencies. And when you were looking at the US firms, they were always the ones who had like paralegal night shift hours, because they got their US counterparts in the States. And so your shift would your day would start at 5:30 and finish like at 3 a.m. And it was always the US firms who had those jobs available. And I was like, no, I like my sleep.
That doesn't surprise me at all. So when I thought about doing the book, I was like, to be honest, even if I didn't add any of the like thriller bits in it, I was like, it's a thriller by itself. Like some of the stuff that goes on in law firms, and like the hours you have to work, and actually like the impact it can have on people's, sort of well-being, etc. So that's kind of what I really wanted to get across with this book, is like, obviously it's really bad, her friends just died and all of this, but also she's working all these horrible hours, and that's what leads her to make the choices. And I think when you're like that, and for these people, career is everything. Like you said, it can consume you and be your whole life, and that's what drives this whole book, is that for these people, career is the only thing they care about, and being as the top person in their career and advancing as far as possible, that's all they care about.
It's crazy. It's so crazy. And you remind me, I need to carry on watching Industry, because I haven't finished it yet, and that's all about I know.
Yeah,
so
that was one of the inspirations for my book, actually, because that came out in like early 2020, and I was like, I can write something about investment bankers. I can write something about lawyers.
Well, you can. And I think this is what the thing, people always say, where do you get inspiration from? It's like, literally just look. I'm not saying this in a like, oh God, I can't think, my brain's not working today. Like, I'm not trying to be sarcastic or I'm not trying to patronize you, but like, look around you. Doesn't matter where you work. Like, you could be managing Tesco's, it doesn't matter. But all of that, they will create they're all these separate little entities, and they have their own inner workings, their own inner world. And there'll be villains and anti-villains and heroes in that small little world in which you occupy, and that becomes your inspiration. So that's what I say.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're not in an industry, it's interesting to the people that aren't in it. So even if you think, oh, this is really boring, actually people who don't do your job probably think it's really interesting.
Yeah, that is true. Definitely true. So Rhiannon, on to your final questions. Are you an introvert or extrovert, or a hybrid of the two?
I think I'm a hybrid. I love to sort of be inside, read my book, but then I also get a lot of energy from being around people, but not for too long. You know, it has to be in the right dosage. So yeah, I'd say I'm a hybrid. I'd say I'm a extroverted introvert. I think if I've got
An
that the right way around.
extroverted. Yeah, no, you have. You have.
Yeah.
Okay, so what challenge or experience in your life shaped you the most? And I feel I always have to caveat this with saying it doesn't have to be a bad challenge or experience. It can be a good one.
Okay, I do have one, but it's a bit sad. So the thing that probably changed my life the most was when my dad died, which was when I was 24 and I was in the final seat of my training contract. And so it was really difficult because obviously I was working such long hours and I was about to qualify and all of these things. But actually, it kind of changed my outlook on life because actually I would say before that I was a very sort of career obsessed person. And like my career was absolutely everything to me. And obviously it is still very important to me, but that sort of just changed my outlook on life. And I was like, you know what, life is short, do the things you want to do. And actually I do wonder if that hadn't happened, if I would have ever written my book, because, you know, it's so easy to be like, oh, I'll do it later in a few years when I have time.
Yeah.
You know, it's so easy to say that. But when, you know, you're reminded of like, you know, life is short, just do it. Don't wait, because there's never a perfect time to do anything.
No,
so yeah, that'd be my biggest challenge.
Yeah, I always say two things, that there always seems to be, there's always a pivot basically in your life that will force you to reassess things, and it's those moments when there's a pivot where you may finally just take a chance and do the thing that you want to do or make that change in your life. And then what I always used to say to my brother is that, listen, you'll never be the right amount of money or the right business space, or I don't know, the right, like you can keep waiting for these things to have that right amount of money in the bank or to find, I don't know, I said the right office space. And those perfect things may come, or they may come in completely different times. So you just have to just take a chance and do that thing now. And then you'll find that all those other things that you've been waiting for, they suddenly align with you.
Yeah. Everyone has to start somewhere. Like even, you know, the people you like, the authors you look at, which are just like selling so many books. At one point, all they had was a blank piece of paper, and that was it.
Exactly. And there's so many authors like that. When you look at their careers, they've been a writer for like 20, 25 years, but they then didn't hit the mark until it was like book 16. But then all you're then seeing is the highlights from 16 onward. You're thinking, oh, it's always been that way. And you're like, no, you have to look back. It's been a journey.
Yeah, definitely.
So no, will this question work for you? If you could go back to when you're 25 years old and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
I guess, so if we go back to 20, well, let's go back maybe a bit earlier than that, but I think I would just say, just 21. Don't be afraid. Just don't be afraid of doing things. Like, I think I very much was the sort of person, just wait for the perfect time to do things. And even recently, I think it's still something I'm still learning. For example, for ages, I was so scared to join like TikTok, for example, because I was like, oh, I'm not very good at filming myself and putting myself out there. And now actually I realize I really like it and it's great. And it's such a good community and I really enjoy doing it. But for ages, I was like, oh, I can't do that. I can't put myself out there. Or even like in Instagram, I don't want to take a photo with me in it. I'll just take a photo of just the books. And I think just do it. And, no one's going to care or judge you. If anything, it's the opposite. Like you just get such nice feedback and you really get to engage with people and build a community. And I think just put yourself out there because actually people are lovely.
They are. I mean, even like for me, and it sounds so ridiculous for me to even say it. Like I can do my podcast, like no issue, and that's just me talking. I say not me talking, but it's us talking, having a conversation. It's like I talk for a living. Before this, it's like I got paid to talk. I stood in front of juries. I stood in front of the judge. I have interviews, advise clients. Like I'm paid to talk. But then there was a point where the idea of me filming myself, talking about anything and then posting it on social media, I'm like, what? No, I don't feel like I can't do that. I feel like I'm exposing too much of myself. I'm like, how can I do that? But I'm like, you do all these other things. Why would putting a 60-second video of yourself fill you with such, I don't know, doubts and dread. And I had to have a word, like I had to have a word with myself, not anything. Come on, seriously. Seriously. Really. Is this going to be the thing that's going to drag you down. Like, no. Like, look what everyone else, and yeah, sometimes you have to say, look what everyone else is doing. Like, it's nothing. And then you do it and you're like, actually. And also, don't worry about what people think. I think that's what happens a lot of the time. We worry about what people are going to say.
Yeah. Exactly.
Crazy.
I think just put yourself out there.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question before we leave each other. What has your journey so far, not the legal journey, the publishing, writing journey, what has that journey taught you about yourself?
What's it taught me about myself? I think it's taught me that to deal with rejection and setbacks, because I don't think any writer has had a journey where it's like you've got a yes every single step of the way and you've never had any rejection whatsoever. I mean, I'd be shocked if there's a writer that's never had a no from an agent or an editor or, you know, something like that. And I think I was always quite, despite the sort of going through the law firm rejection journey, I took rejection so personally and it would really upset me. Any type of rejection in any type of, you know, manner in life. But I think it's helped me be a bit more like hardened my skin a bit and be like, actually, you know what, rejection isn't you're not good enough. It's just a part of a process, you know, because you have rejection where you get to as a writer, even once you're published, you're going to have readers not like your book because it's impossible to write a book that everybody loves. And, you know, I think getting used to that and being like, you know, it's okay. I mean, I'd love it if everyone loved everything I ever wrote, but it's okay. It's okay if someone doesn't like my book. Like, that's okay. Like, that's valid. They're fine to have that opinion. That's okay.
Yeah, you just keep it. I always say you just keep it moving. I just say, okay, that was nice to know. I didn't need to know that, but just keep it moving. You do you, and I'll do me, and that's how we're going to move in the world.
Yes.
Well, Rhiannon, that just leaves me to say thank you so much for being part of the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's conversation with Nadine Matheson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday for a brand new episode featuring more amazing guests. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a review. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you'd like to support the show, you can buy me a cup of coffee or sign up on Patreon. The links are in the show notes. And if you'd love to join the conversation as a guest, feel free to send an email to theconversation@nadinematheson.com. Thanks again for your support, and I'll catch you next time.